Good morning, good afternoon, and good evening to wherever you in the world you may be. I welcome you to the NISSMAT podcast on project management. I am Pawanjit Ahluwalia, the moderator of NISSMAT, and I'm thrilled to be your host today. NISSMAT was founded in the 1990s and has four wings: the NISSMAT Forum, the Academy, Enterprise, and Foundation. The podcast today is under the aegis of the NISSMAT Forum. We have an exciting episode ahead, delving into the world of project implementation. Whether you are a seasoned project manager or someone just stepping into the realm of project execution, today's discussion is bound to provide valuable insights. We have with us from the United States an expert in the field, Kashiana Singh, who brings a wealth of experience and knowledge on successful project implementation. A word about Kashiana. Kashana grew up in India and spent the first 18 years of her 26 years as professional grounded in end-to-end management roles, both for startups and established corporations, which helped ground off her competencies and honed her professional as well as personal resilience. Colleagues and clients recall Kashiana's high energy presence as authentic, reliable, and meticulous. Kashana serves as Vice President Operations at Private Health Management, and prior to this assignment, she was Vice President for Mid Market Health Solutions delivery with Allied Solutions based out of Lincolnshire in Chicago. Overall, she brings over 26 years of outcome oriented experience in business operations, an organizational catalyst, and a versatile leader with success in client and operational performance turnaround, engagement, and retention management for both clients and colleagues. Kashiana strives to embody her TEDx talk theme of work as worship into her everyday life. She is a poet, and her chapbook, Crushed Anthills, is a journey through 10 cities. Her newest full length collection, Woman by the Door, was released in February of 22. Her poetry can be heard and read across various international forums. Let's dive right in and explore the key elements, challenges, and best practices that make projects not just successful but truly impactful. I'd like to welcome Kashiana once again for this podcast this morning and evening. Kashiana, what, in your opinion, are the key elements of a successful project implementation?
Sure, and thank you for having me. I always enjoy the NISSMAT sessions, both listening and participating. So I appreciate you. And I also appreciate this topic. It's very close to my heart. And the one thing I'll say before I answer that specific question is project and or program management, which we should talk about as well through our conversation, is not just about organizations or workspaces. It applies in life, right? Life is a project. So with that, therefore, to your question, just like in life, what are the key elements that apply to project management? And I would say I at least leverage 8 principles to always anchor any program that I'm leading, just like in life. One, all projects, every project is unique. Every project has a start and an end, both in terms of dates or timelines, as well as in terms of scope. All projects need to start by establishing common goals. Those goals can be adjusted and should be actually adjusted based on evaluation of risk. All projects that are well managed have toll gates at essential points on the journey. Just like in life, we have toll gates. On essential points of the journey, if we pay attention to those, we can take the lessons learned and apply them to the next upcoming toll gates. Also extremely important is resources, which includes things like time and collaboration. And last but not the least, I know I said something earlier about goals, but more importantly, from a program perspective, from a stakeholder perspective, what are the defined and aligned success measures of the project? That's really what I would say are the key anchors of any project/program management approach.
How difficult is it to align the project to these goals?
Difficult if you don't follow the process and if you don't lean into well established principles of getting to the consensus or arriving at the consensus. So it's difficult if you don't follow. It's very easy if you follow, and also if you as the program leader or your project team come to the table with the right skill sets and the right attributes. And I know we'll talk about that a little later as well.
Kashiana, you're establishing a project and you're putting the timelines in, and how do you get your team together to sort of have a common goal? Because there can be various pulls and pressures. Some, especially if it's an internal project management that you're doing, some of the employees may not actually be falling in line to your way of thinking. How do you get them aligned?
Yeah, so maybe we should go there. It's the right time to go there, which is what are the critical factors to consider when putting a team together? And this team could be, there's two parts. What are the characteristics of the individual that you pick or ask for or request to be on your project? And the structure of how you as a leader govern the team, right? Both are important. So first, let's talk about the people characteristics. And one of the most important that I look for is that of a project manager or a project team member should be a people person. That almost sounds contradictory because very often the misconception, sir, is that, oh, I'm going to be on a project or I'm leading a program, so I'm going to be in my own myopic view sitting on my computer and running the project. Actually, that's the misconception, and that's where the problems start. Program and project leaders and team members need to enjoy being a people person because it's all about communication, negotiation, evaluation, right? Understanding, brainstorming, and none of that happens in isolation. It happens with other stakeholders. So being a people person, being self-assured and self-driven is extremely important. Being detail-oriented and organized is another very relevant factor. And then last but not the least, I think what I would say is when I form a team, you don't look for one type of a person. I would like to look for different characteristics in different people and different strengths in different people so that you have a good combination of the pull and push within the team, such that when you go out to internal or external stakeholders, you've already thought about different perspectives, different points of view, and different vantage points to thinking through the risks, thinking through the expectations, and thinking through what comes next. That's as far as characteristics is concerned. The structure of the team, meaning how you govern the team, is also as important. You can put the best team together, but if you don't have a clear understanding of what type of a team you're going to form and how you're going to govern it, there's going to be failure points. Generally speaking, there could be a couple of different ways to structure a team, right? You could have a matrix team structure. You could have a dedicated project team aligned to that project. You could also work with a hybrid structure. I'm right now working on a program which is a hybrid structure team. And then last, leaning into the way we run our programs today, having an agile structure, right? Which is start with one thing, but change being the key. You continue to check and adjust both the structure of the team and potentially adding or adjusting people who work with you as you go through the life cycle of the project.
Kashiana, agile method of working today is just the thing that people want to do today, especially in IT projects and so on. Everyone talks of you must be sort of agile in it and discuss every day in the morning and then change yourself to the changing situations. Can you just brief us on your experience on agile structuring of project implementation?
Yeah, and yes, I absolutely can. And I would though say it isn't just about IT projects. It applies to all projects. And the reason it applies to all projects is because of the fundamentals of what we'll talk about in a minute. So first, let's ground ourselves, right? The The comparison we are talking about in terms of pure methodology is the comparison between agile and the old school methodology of waterfall way of running a project, or something else where I think that I can run a program or a project by just writing down a couple of points, putting it into an Excel document, and think now I have a project, right? That also exists in the real world. Agile particularly is basically iterative, and it's never stuck in a point in time, right? So like I said, in an agile team, for example, you self-organize around self-reliance, and the communication, to the way you described, is frequent, not just every day, sometimes multiple times a day. You make sure to huddle, right? You align and you move forward. In the waterfall method, the role of the team members and the structure is predetermined, and the connection point is less frequent. It does exist. It has to exist in any project, but it's less determined. It's less frequent. The second is fluidity. Like I said, it's iterative. Agile is always iterative. It's fluid. And what I mean by that is you continue to shift and adjust. The key words are continuous shifting and adjustment based on the evolving situation. Now, compared to waterfall, in the old school, 10 years or maybe a little more ago, you wanted to spend a lot of time on requirements gathering, right? Sign and seal the requirements with a beautiful bow before you even start putting hands on keyboard to make any changes to either the system or the process, depending on what you were working on. You still do requirements gathering. You still gather expectations in Agile, but the key is not perfection, but MVP, or minimal value proposition, minimal value product, minimal value process that you continue to adjust as needed. What does that do? That allows you to move more quickly than waterfall projects because A, you're flexible, B, you're getting an MVP view in front of users. So now the next advantage is I, as an end user, can play. I can touch and feel the product, right? Whether it's a process, whether it's a product, whether it's a market strategy, I can touch and feel it and adjust based on what I experience from that. So deliverables in the agile approach for a project are turned over throughout the life cycle versus this entire waterfall where the end product is delivered only upon project completion. Very critical difference between that two. And then lastly, documentation. While documentation is key, always key, because you do need documentation, in the agile approach, it's less formal, and I would love to talk a little more about the style of communication in a little bit, but in the agile approach, it's less formal, and again, it's throughout the life cycle, whereas in a waterfall approach, it used to be extremely heavy on documentation and almost got bureaucratic in the old world. Now, every one of these methodologies comes with its pros and cons, because if you don't adjust and if you don't lean one towards the other, then you're going to be stuck in a problem anyway. Does that help?
Yes, it does. And Kashiana, you spoke about the matrix team structure. How would you define the matrix team structure?
Yeah, various ways. Again, the fundamental of agile is never to get stuck in a definition. It's about watching what's happening around you, evaluating what's going on with the business, understanding stakeholder expectations, and adjusting. But at its core, a matrix is where it's not a pyramid reporting structure. You could have a combination of a people leader, a stakeholder manager, and a program manager, and all three could be playing a role with the project lead and with the project team. That, in a sense, is what a matrix structure means.
So with the agile system of working, does the matrix system work the best?
Yes, I would say mostly in my experience, matrixed and or the alternate other is hybrid, where you might need a dedicated structure at the beginning of the project when you're in the planning stage of the project, but then you move to a matrix structure. So very often I follow that approach, which is I start with dedicated and then I move to a matrixed structure, but in general, I've seen the matrix structure work better with the agile methodology.
Kashiana, planning is an important tool before you start. Uh, Now, there is no dearth of the fact that proper planning leads to proper implementation. And what would you suggest are the tools that one should be using for project planning?
Let's talk about both the things. Yes, we all know the stages. We know the traditional 5 stages. Actually, I like to convert the initiation, planning, executing, controlling, closing to a more layman terminology, and I like to think of it when I lead programs as defining the problem, or defining not the problem, the opportunity, defining the opportunity, developing the scope and timeline and the project plan or the program plan, delivering, going back to Agile, delivering an MVP, delivering a minimal viable product, deploying, taking it broader, displaying. Visualization is extremely important, meaning what happens, how do you measure, right? What do you see? Is the process moving where it was expected to, or is it not, right? And then delineating is extremely important and a very often missed approach to program management, which is reviewing what you set out to do and where you stand. With that being said, your point about tools or methodologies for the planning process, I would answer that question as these are the tools and methodologies, not just for the planning process, but the entire program management process. And I'll break that down into what are the methods you use, what are the practices you use as a good program team, and what are the technologies you use. So let's start with methods. A, follow the course, study. It's like poetry, right? Nothing is different. In poetry, it said, know your rules and then break the rules. Don't start by breaking the rules. A lot of poets, as they start off, think, oh, I don't care about grammar. I'm a poet. I can write anything. Great, but do you know the grammar rules, right? So first, learn the rules and then break the rules. Likewise, in program management, understand the program lifecycle management terms, terminologies, rules, methodology, and understand the methodology of risk governance. That's extremely important and often overlooked focus in program management. So those are the 2 methods I like to follow. In terms of practices, I said earlier about defining the opportunity / problem statement. I don't like to use the word problem. I like to use the word opportunity. But like you said in planning, spending time on writing down the opportunity statement from the lens of the customer, internal and external both, with a cross-functional team is key to getting the program going in the right direction. Very often we jump to solving the problem without even understanding what the problem is. It's like going to a doctor, right? You give your symptoms and they start treating you for something without going to the root cause of why your symptoms are showing up. The second practice that I follow, and like I said earlier, both in life, in poetry, as well as in program management, is asking the 5 whys. The why, and being maniacal about asking the 5 whys. The technologies is ever evolving, so my answer may be good today and change tomorrow. But the technologies that I've touched and felt over the last probably 3 to 5 years that have worked very well are technologies like Monday. It's a software for program management, using simple things like Gantt charts, which have been in existence forever, and then using actual IT deployment technologies like Jira, which is a software, which is a project management tool to break down your project into smaller stories and work through it. Was that the question?
Yes. Yeah, that's fairly good. But tell me something. You put a team together, and let's say you've chosen some people, and some people fail to come up to expectation during the project various stages of the project. Do you get rid of them, or do you sort of egg them on because they're slowing down impeding your progress at one stage, and then you really got to carry your team with you also? So, how would you address this situation?
Yeah, that's a broader leadership question, right? It's not just a program management question. I never get rid of people. Talking about me, I always go with the perspective of it's either a coaching problem, a mentoring problem, or a round peg in a square hole, or a square peg in a round hole problem. And how do you adjust? Do you adjust the peg, or do you adjust the hole? Is the question. So we'll we'll reserve the leadership pieces of it, but in in the space of program management, really let's take a step back and say, what are some of the common pitfalls, because those pitfalls impact this people issue that might arise, or a skill issue that might arise. It's never a people issue, right? It's always a skill.
So let's talk of the pitfalls.
Yeah, right. And so the first thing is, did we as leaders and as program managers underestimate the human side of the project, of the project, right? It is critical, like I said earlier, the people that I like to pick for my programs are people. It is critical to ensure interaction, collaboration, to bring negotiation. So the question number one, did I underestimate the human element of the program? Two, did I, as a program leader, establish the right rhythm? I've spoken about governance a few times. Did I establish the right rhythm to ensure a continuous, consistent, and coordinated communication, not just with the program team, right, but with other stakeholders? But it starts with the program team. If I don't communicate with my own team in a continuous, consistent, and coordinated manner, my program communication externally is going to suffer as well. So that's question number two. Question number three is the reason I'm seeing an issue with people because I am too committed to the plan I put together? That's one of the biggest pitfalls I've seen. All of us as program leaders fall prey to that. In fact, forget the word program. All of us as leaders fall prey to that, which is you write down a plan, you think this is my strategy, and you become so committed to it that you become myopic in your vision. Instead, if you're open to alternate options and start listening to what's happening around you, then A, it solves the people skill problem, and B, it doesn't let your program come towards the end realizing that actually the goalpost shifted, but you never shifted your plan based on the goalpost.
So, what would you, if you were to count out the pitfalls that you can sort of be encountering? One is the people, the other is the skill set. What other points would you sort of look as challenges and pitfalls?
Yeah, I would say ineffective governance, but governance is a motherhood term. So what does that mean, right? What that means is ineffective pacing and sequencing of what needs to be done. That's very often one of the pitfalls because we either get too ambitious and want to do a lot too soon, or too less, such that interest and purpose is lost in terms of the progress. So pacing and sequencing what you're doing, which again connects to the agile discussion we had. The reason I love the agile approach is because it breaks down this big elephant. I call it bite the elephant a piece at a time. Don't try to eat the whole elephant together. And agile allows you to bite the elephant a piece at a time because it works on story points, right? You break down the big problem you want to successfully deliver into really small pieces to be. So pacing, sequencing, breaking the problem or breaking the opportunity down into pieces. And then lastly, always, like I said, everything is a leadership problem, is communication. It is extremely important to have a multi-dimensional communication strategy, which then touches the change management. Because remember, whenever you're running a program/project, the most critical element for it to be successful is also change management. And most effective change management happens when you have a multidimensional approach, not just one-to-one, one-to-many, one-to-multiple, brainstorming, written communication, town halls, verbal communication, newsletters, posters, badges, rewarded. Like you have to think, not everything has to happen at the same time because you have to think about the iron triangle of the budget as well, but having a multidimensional approach. So those are the two or three common pitfalls.
What is the kind of a training that a project manager needs to have before he is put onto a leadership role in a project management?
Yeah, like I think that connects back to the pitfalls as well as to the methodology. So can I at least, I don't, this is again my approach, it may not be every leader's or program manager's approach. You don't necessarily have to have qualified, am I a Six Sigma professional? Am I a lean professional? Am I a PMP qualified person? But do I understand the core principles of program management, and or can I orient the person to, most often, actually 70–80% of the time, folks that I have either led programs with or have had on my team do not have any of these qualifications, but they have a desire to learn. And so training them to the core, orienting them to the core principles is important. The second piece of the training that I really do like to focus on is what I said earlier, which is there are some tools and methodologies which come from a variety of these quality systems, like how do you ask the 5 whys? How do you write an opportunity statement? Again, you don't sit on your computer and write. How do you work with a cross-functional team through very opinionated leaders and evolve and crystallize an opportunity statement where you can define the external and internal customer, you can put a financial impact of not solving the opportunity to it, and you can put the guardrails of the scope, because scope creep is another one of the pitfalls, of program management that I didn't touch upon earlier. So orienting them to core program management, teaching them or exposing them to case studies and real life practice of some of these tools, like I said. And then last but not the least, again, how do you communicate when there is a problem? How do you communicate when a leader who's a critical stakeholder or a sponsor of the program gets extremely rigid or is not engaging, Engagement of leaders and stakeholders is another pitfall that we then speak about. And as a program leader, learning how I engage with the stakeholders is extremely important, because I can't be running a program in a vacuum in the organization.
That's so right, actually, because majority of the projects stumble when the project leader is not committed to the project calls.
Yes.
And
yes.
Can we just get across and if you can point out some things that you should look forward to in making sure that you don't step over the budgets and the timelines?
Yes, all interconnected. One doesn't happen without the other. How do you not step over budget timeline is number one, connects back to your prior question of training. Have I trained myself and my program and project team to focus on risk governance, not as a thing that happens when the noise starts to happen on the ground, but to happen proactively, Do I evaluate risks early, often, and consistently, Early, often, and consistently, important words. Very often what we do is, we're only starting the planning and the ideation part of the project. I'm only in phase 1 and phase 2 of the project. What risks could exist, I'm still defining the plan, but actually risks start right from day 1 of the project. So that's number one. Number 2 is ensuring that we, like I said earlier, we pivot. The ability to pivot by always being open to alternates. And these are all connected, If I am a good risk governing leader, then I will know, it'll stare at my face to say, the plan that I had is going to fail. I need to pivot and adjust my approach to the plan that I started by writing or started by putting. Two other things. Addressing the big rocks. We get stuck in the minutia. So while the strengths of a good program leader are also very often the weaknesses of a program leader. When you're detail oriented, you like to be in the minutia, right? You like to write down every step. You like to know every piece of the puzzle. But how do you lift yourself from being at the 5,000 feet on the ground, lift yourself often to the 50,000 feet so you can understand the big rocks and solve the big rocks versus being in the minutia? Now, the minutia is important. It's core to program management success. So the key is, again, how do you lift yourself in and out to be able to address the big rocks? And then lastly, I would say is connected to what I said earlier about the pacing and sequencing, which is very important because everybody can want a lot of things at the same time. And how do you get your stakeholders to be aligned to the pacing and sequencing so that the what you're delivering and at what time becomes important? I'll wrap that by saying the reason all that is important is because not every problem within the big problem is made equal, and not every solution is made equal, right? The impact, effort, and risk of not delivering that has to be evaluated on an ongoing basis to say, I can combine some high impact, low effort items, right, deliverables with some low effort, high impact deliverables and continue to balance my stakeholder management.
Kashiana, how do you measure and evaluate the success of a project once it has been implemented?
Step number one is, do you know what success means? Have you agreed to what the success criteria of the program are going to be? Another big pitfall, right? We start off and we don't know really what does success look like in the eyes of the program sponsor and the key stakeholders, number one. Number two, amongst the stakeholders, is there consensus on what success looks like? That's extremely important. Typically, you would like to think about success measures from the lens of the customer, both internal and external. So let's assume we are running a program for a customer service team, and we are changing the technology that they use to take their calls, to log their calls, to document their information. Success has to be defined in the lens of the internal customer, which is the person who's taking the call, and does his work or their work become better, easier, faster, more effective, right? That's number one. And then external customer also, meaning if I as a customer service person is doing my job better, is it impacting you who's calling from the outside to get either your loan or your phone or your credit card or whatever the case may be. Now, so external and internal customer lens is success measure number one. Number two is financials. What does it matter? Does it matter that the cost to serve a customer is either identified? You'll be surprised, Pawan sir, how often many organizations and our business units and departments, when asked the question, what's the current state? Could you tell me what the current state to serve a unit of work is? What's the cost? Very often people will not know, and you start stumbling and fumbling with answers. So there could be two types of financial success criteria. One, do I just need to understand what it takes to serve? Or do I know what it takes to serve and I need to reduce that cost to serve a customer, right? And that could be an internal customer or an internal customer, but there is usually, not always, usually some type of a financial success criteria. And the last success criteria, which these two are usually well cared for, because any leader who's running a program knows that they have to think about the customer and think about financials. The third criteria is often overlooked, which is the engagement of the team that is going to be the receivers of the end state of the program, right? Am I more engaged in doing my work? Do I feel more empowered doing my work? Do I feel more empowered to do more for my customer, right, etc.? So engagement, financials, and the third being, what is the measure? What's the success defined in the lens of the external and internal customer? Those are the typical success criteria. I'll wrap my answer with one important thing, which is that's the what, and then there's the how. So what is fine, you can define what the success measures are, but how do you arrive at those measures and how do you share those measures are equally important. How do you arrive? Am I going to arrive at those measures? And you'll be surprised how many times this happens, which is it anecdotal feedback? Or do I have a way to capture data to drive my decisions and to drive my results? Extremely important. I feel we are I feel we are doing better. I feel it's taking less time to deliver step 1 to step Z. Okay, great. I do want the feeling, because remember I said engagement is a key success criteria, but I do want data, right? Because you have to follow the data. You have to follow the facts. And then last how is the visualization. How am I talking about these success criteria? Am I visualizing the results throughout the life cycle of the program to stakeholders at critical toll gates? Or am I, again, like the waterfall methodology, coming at the end and saying, okay, sir, here's your results, and then you're surprised because your expectations have changed along the way, or the results aren't where you expected them to be.
Kashiana, tell me something. How do you foster a sense of continuous improvement in project implementation processes?
Yeah, that's my favorite question. Because again, that applies to life. Continuous improvement is something we have to all learn in life, or continuous evolving, right? That's a spiritual goal we all have, is how do you evolve spiritually and keep moving up the Maslow's triangle or hierarchy, but the same applies to continuous improvement. How do you foster this? Encourage ideation. Don't shut down ideas. And the ideation needs to happen in the gemba, right? The gemba is, in Japanese terminology, gemba is the word for where does the work happen. Remember this, the Japanese theories and technologies and perceptions all started from factory environments. So the gemba is in a factory where the work is happening, where are the machines, where are the people, where are the workers, but it applies to any place. So am I allowing ideating, but am I also, as a program leader and a strategic leader of the organization, walking the floor to understand what's happening in the gemba to capture ideation and ideas, right? 3, and this, you've heard this. This is another much used and probably abused term. Is, are you encouraging and can you encourage the culture of failing fast? Is it okay to try something and fail? Connects back to the agile methodology. Agile allows you to fail fast, right? Get an idea, define the scope, understand the stakeholders, put guardrails so you aren't risking more than you're okay to risk. Execute it, roll it out, and it either succeeds, so now you build on it, the next enhancement and the next enhancement and the next enhancement, or it fails and you go back to the drawing board and you start writing the ideas. That encourages, there's a lot of adrenaline rush that comes from doing that, and most companies like Google and Apple actually allow team members to dedicate close to 20% of their time to not client billable time, but to ideation and failing fast time, right? That's how they are always innovative and growing. 2 other things. The innovation and or ideation is 2 pieces, the big I innovation and the small I innovation. Most organizations and teams could get stuck in either one, right? Oh, I have this big idea. I want to roll out iPhone 15 Pro Max, which will have this camera, this features, blah, blah. That's the big I innovation. The small I innovation is, oh, earlier I had to turn this switch up and down to make the ringer go off. Now I don't need to do anything. I just need to click this once, and the ringer will go in and off. So continuous improvement, it comes both in the small I innovation and the big I innovation, and getting stuck in either prevents the organization from creating and fostering a culture of continuous improvement. And lastly, creating a culture, and this goes back to my Gemba example, teaching the last person on the floor, the youngest and the lowest person on the floor, to understand the concept of waste. When I am doing my work and spending 8 hours at work, am I pressing a keyboard 5 times where I could do my work pressing a keyboard 2 times? Do I have that mindset? How do I train people to have that mindset so that then the ideation funnel, right, is filled, because I'll be asking questions and raising that to the right people.
I go back into, when we started, I asked you a question as to what are the factors to consider when selecting or forming a project implementation team. I know it's a leadership question, it's a question of choice, but it's also limited to the people that you have. Uh, if you don't want to get people from the outside to do your work, and you got to form a team from within your organizational structure, and so therefore you are limited to the skill sets that you have within the organization. So how would you suggest that people go about it? Because majority of the companies are not Googles and Apples. Uh, they are much smaller. They are much smaller ones. So when we talk of Google and Apple, what they can do, the smaller companies may not be able to do. And so, and therefore, the skill sets available in smaller companies are not as resourceful as with the Google and Apples. So, what do you suggest for them?
Yeah, that of course we all work for companies that are not Googles and Apples. I would say my characteristics don't change. It still goes to saying find the best, and this is said very often, right? Is if you hire, in this case you're hiring internally, if you hire the best people, right, then you never have to work to fire anybody. So with that in mind, and very carefully knowing the best is a very subjective definition as well. The characteristics that I look for is, do you like communicating with people, or are you not a communicator? Now, not that I will not select that person. Let's say you're not a good communicator or don't like to communicate with people, but you have excellent certifications and knowledge, right, for program management. I might take you on the team at the beginning stages or the ending stages of the program, but may not need you throughout the program. I will say one thing, and then I'll qualify some other skills. If I'm giving it a choice of 2 people, one that has the skills of communication, organization, being proactive, being committed, having the fire in the belly to be committed to this idea or to this program, over somebody who doesn't have a lot of these, but is PMP certified, Six Sigma certified, Lean certified, I would pick the one with skills over the one with the certification. Right? That being said, the characteristics to look for are what I just described, which is communication, fitment. I will add one more thing, and then we can pause for any follow-up that you have, is being a subject matter expert for the project topic or the program topic we are thinking about, right? So let's say it's a customer service technology program versus it's a market segmentation program where you're launching a new product to newer market segment. Those two require very different subject matter domain skills. So I will add the skills that I said earlier to the domain skills and then the actual technical skills of understanding program management. And in that order, first, communication, fire in the belly, passion, liking to work with people, putting yourself in uncomfortable situations, having an eye for detail and understanding risk. Second, are you a subject matter expert in any one of the program skills that you need? And third, do I also then have the qualifications to do what I have to
Wonderful. Kashiana, now you've been working internationally for the last many years. What are international challenges for project management?
do? That's a great point. First and foremost is, and I didn't mention the skill, so I love that you went there, is cross-cultural competence, right? One of the things I do look for in my project team is, does this individual have cross-cultural competence? What that means is, am I okay working with people, right, that sit across and follow the sun? People who are sitting in India, Asia, Singapore, right, or Middle East or Europe. Do I have the understanding of cross-cultural competency? I'll use the word agile, but not in the terms of, am I agile enough in adjusting my communication styles based on the person or the team I am talking to? Because very often when you're going to get on these stand-ups in the morning, afternoon, and night, you will be speaking to potentially either a global team, right? And every person on the global team will have a different context when they come to the table in terms of expectations and communication. And or I might have to change from talking to somebody far in Japan or China to begin with, and then travel my day through talking to people across the rest of the world. So do I have the agility and the mental resilience to be able to do that? Because it's extremely tough, right? To be wearing different hats throughout the day. That is the biggest challenge. We think we are global, and we are. Almost every company has global teams and global organizations, but the unsaid and the unspoken risks that arise are because expectation setting was either not done clearly or was done in a unilateral, single-minded way versus translating expectations to the understanding of my global team, right? That is actually one of the biggest pitfalls that companies in the global environment experience today. The second, and this again is something I do look for in my program team members, is the ability to influence without authority. Most program leaders don't really, their project team members very rarely report to them, right? They very rarely have a reporting relationship to them, both within country and ex-country as well. Remember, and especially ex-country. If you have a team that's sitting in India or Japan or China, you're not going to be having that team reporting to you. That team will have their own people management, right, and leadership within the country. So the skill and the competency of influencing without authority, how do you get people to work for you when you have no control over their salary, their compensation, their annual appraisal, their annual review, or how you interact with them on a day-to-day basis, or where their jobs and careers are going to. So how do you become a mentor that allows you to influence people without authority?
I think, Kashiana, we've had a wonderful discussion. We're running out of time also now.
I know. This topic can go on and on.
And this concludes our insightful discussion on project implementation for today. We revert to it later with more details on project implementation. And a big thank you to you, Kashiana, for sharing your expertise and valuable insights. I hope our listeners found this conversation as enlightening as I did. Remember, successful project implementation is not just about taking off tasks, but involves a careful orchestration of planning, communication, and adaptability. As we wrap up today's episode, I encourage you to reflect on the key takeaways and consider how you can apply them to your own projects. If you enjoyed this episode, Don't forget to subscribe for more engaging conversations. Until next time, this is Pawanjit Ahluwalia thanking Kashiana for her time today. Thank you, Kashiana.
Thank you. Take care.